You are listening to Viewpoints from PlaceCloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
The Dutch colonial past in Brazil, spanning from 1630 to 1654, is a subject of extensive documentation, yet its significance is perceived differently in Dutch and Brazilian historiographies. The Dutch National Archives, located in The Hague, where we find ourselves now, hold a wealth of documents related to the West India Company and Dutch colonial enterprises, including those concerning Brazil. This archive serves as a crucial research hub for historians delving into Dutch overseas history. The Dutch presence in Brazil remains a secondary topic in Dutch history, often overshadowed by the more prolonged colonial experiences in Indonesia and Suriname. Walter Fernandes, a researcher at the University of Lisbon's History Center, has analyzed how Dutch historians treat the period of Dutch rule in Brazil compared to Brazilian and Portuguese scholars. While Brazil emphasizes the battles to reclaim Pernambuco and re-evaluates myths about Dutch governance, Dutch historians often regard this period as a brief, inconsequential episode. One contributing factor to this divergence is the commercial rather than cultural or religious nature of Dutch colonization. Unlike Portugal, which sought to expand Catholicism, the Netherlands prioritized economic exploitation, particularly through the sugar trade, with much less significant efforts to integrate local populations. The perception of the role of slavery during Dutch rule is another key difference. The Dutch West India Company intensified the transatlantic slave trade to support the sugar plantations in Brazil, a subject thoroughly examined by Brazilian and Portuguese historians. In the Netherlands, however, the discussion of slavery in relation to Brazil is relatively minimal, with greater emphasis placed on its role in Dutch colonies that persisted into the modern era. The 1950s for Indonesia, the 1970s for Suriname, with some smaller territories still being colonies to this day. Despite the secondary status of Dutch Brazil in the Dutch historical narrative, a vast array of primary sources is preserved across multiple Dutch archives. The General State Archives in The Hague hold the most extensive collection on the subject, containing documents from the Dutch West India Company, the States General, and administrative bodies governing the colony. These records cover military operations, commerce, legal matters, and diplomacy, including non-aggression pacts between Holland and Portugal. Notably, the archive includes communications from the Recife High Council, which oversaw Dutch interests in Brazil, as well as records from the Reformed Church synods held in Recife. Beyond The Hague, other repositories also house valuable documents. The Royal Family Archives contain the private correspondence and administrative papers of John Maurice de Nassau, the Governor-General of Dutch Brazil from 1637 to 1644. The Leiden University Library preserves letters from the Dutch pastor Vicente Joachim Soler, who wrote critically about colonial practices, as well as an 18th century reproduction of a document detailing the Dutch siege of Salvador in 1630. Further afield, the Zeels Archief in Middelburg, some 100 kilometers from Rotterdam towards the southwest, holds records of the Reformed Church's activities in Brazil and trade contracts. The Amsterdam Municipal Archives maintain collections related to Jewish Portuguese communities in Recife, catechism efforts for indigenous peoples, and administrative documents such as wills and business transactions linked to Brazil. One interesting resource available in Amsterdam is a collection of commercial documents between Holland and Portugal relating to Brazil before the invasion in 1630, regarding the supply of Dutch textile manufacturers with Brazil wood from Pernambuco, from where they extracted the raw material to produce reddish pigments used to dye fabrics. Despite the wealth of archival material in the Netherlands, accessing and interpreting these documents presents challenges. Collections remain scattered across different cities, and some records have yet to be translated into English, let alone Portuguese. Nonetheless, for scholars of Dutch Brazil, these archives provide indispensable insights into colonial administration, economic networks, and the broader impact of Dutch rule in the Americas. While Dutch historiography might downplay its significance, the enduring interest in Brazil and Portugal underscores the lasting consequences of this period, shaping narratives and historical memory, at least in these parts of the world, where the Dutch period is seen as a fundamental part of Brazil's colonial history, with cultural and economic consequences that persisted after the end of Dutch rule. More so, the Dutch occupation is seen in Brazil as a marker of resistance and for cultural identity, strongly contrasting with the objective and passing treatment the Dutch give to the subject. The building where we are now, part of the Dutch National Archives, was only constructed in 1979, even if the organization goes back to the first years of the 19th century. Perhaps to emphasize the historical relevance of the collection, near the front of the building you can find a fountain with a representation of the first wife of William the Silent, the founding father of what became the Dutch royal house. William was the brother of the grandfather of Maurice de Nassau, Governor-General of Dutch Brazil, and was the one who fought for Dutch independence from Spain. William the Silent's oldest son with this woman, Anna van Egmond, was kidnapped by the Spanish king as retaliation for William's desire for independence. The son, Philip William, eventually was able to return to Holland and died because of all things, a badly administered enema. Philip William left no heirs, which meant the title of Prince of Orange, referring to a small once sovereign state in what is now the south of France, reverted to a half-brother, the namesake of the Dutch colonial administrator of Brazil, Maurice of Orange.